Good morning. It's Wednesday, May 14th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 586 days old. I'm your host, FDD Senior Research Analyst Natalie Ecanow, filling in for Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back to the FDD Morning Brief. Nuclear seems to be the buzzword of the past couple of weeks. So fittingly, our guest today is Andrea Stricker, Deputy Director of FDD's Nonproliferation and Biodefense program. She caught up with John yesterday to talk Trump's Middle East tour, U.S. nuclear cooperation with the Saudis, the potential ripple effects for U.S.-Iran nuclear talks, and more. Stick around for that timely conversation, coming right up after a few thoughts of my own. I'm coming at you live from Israel, where I've spent the better part of the last week strolling the streets of Tel Aviv between meetings and meals. There are posters plastered everywhere advertising Qatar as an enemy. That seems to be the general mood here. Israelis are sensing that Doha isn't their friend. This may have more to do with the Qatargate scandal than with Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, or Al Jazeera. But spidey senses are tingling here in Israel in a way they just aren't in the United States. By now you probably know about the $400 million gift that Doha offered President Trump. Yes, I'm talking about the Lux Boeing jet that's reportedly destined to become Air Force One. It's one thing to work with the Qataris to get things done. It's quite another to accept palatial airplanes from them. Doha is eager for American friendship, and Washington likes the razzle-dazzle of deals and gestures that it can offer. So the good times keep on rolling. And I won't be surprised if the good times keep on rolling some more with President Trump in Qatar today as part of his multi-stop tour of the Gulf. I've seen rumblings of a $200 to $300 billion drone and aircraft deal in the works. Let me leave you with one last observation from Israel. All this deal-making is contributing to a growing sense that Washington is leaving Israel behind. Whether or not that's true or sensible is a discussion for another day. But with Israelis feeling sidestepped and the Qataris basking in American friendship, it looks to me like Washington is confusing friend from foe. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, Tehran's oils for missile pipeline to Beijing just got sanctioned. Yesterday, the U.S. cracked down on an international smuggling ring moving billions of dollars worth of Iranian crude oil to China. The network operates under the authority of Iran's Armed Forces General Staff, fronted by an Iranian energy company. This oil is more than just an environmental hazard. The billions Iran rakes in from these illicit deals go straight into the mullah's coffers. Yep, that means more missiles, more drones, and more funding for their nuclear program. And it gives Tehran more cash to bankroll its terror proxies like the Houthis, who just yesterday fired another missile at Israel, which, by the way, flew over Saudi airspace while Trump was mid-speech. I'm not exactly feeling that deterrence, and it seems like the Houthis, with plenty of Tehran backing, aren't either. Headline 2, Israel targeted Muhammad Sinwar in a strike yesterday. He was hiding in a bunker underneath a hospital in Khan Yunis. For a quick recap, Muhammad Sinwar is the younger brother of Yahya Sinwar, Hamas's former chief and the mastermind behind the October 7th attacks. You may recall that Yahya met his fiery end in October 2024 when the IDF eliminated him by sheer chance in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Muhammad's death is still unconfirmed, though the IDF seems increasingly confident he was killed in the strike. If true, it would be another significant blow to Hamas and could even have positive implications on another hostage release deal. And headline 3, yesterday, President Trump announced that he's lifting sanctions on Syria to, quote, give them a chance at greatness, end quote. Trump met Syrian leader Ahmed al-Shara today in Riyadh. Here's where things get sticky. Al-Shara is the former head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a jihadist group that grew out of the al-Qaeda-affiliated al-Nusra Front. Until recently, the U.S. had a $10 million bounty on his head. Saudi Crown Prince MBS was also present at the meeting, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan joined over the phone. I checked in with our favorite terror finance guru, Jonathan Schanzer, who put it bluntly. This move was made way too early. Syria's new regime has done little to justify lifting sanctions. So far, there's scant evidence that the government in Damascus is anything more than a rebranded jihadist outfit. We could be looking at a cash-flush, Muslim Brotherhood, Sunni jihadist state parked right on Israel's border. However, if this gamble pays off, that would be good news for the United States and for Saudi Arabia. The new Syria could ditch its reliance on Islamist Turkey, and Erdogan could forget about calling any more shots. But looking at the meeting's attendance list, I'm not holding my breath. All right, it's time to press play on that interview with Andrea Stricker of FDD's Nonproliferation and Biodefense program, conducted by your loyal host, John Schanzer. Andrea will help us better understand that Washington-Riyadh nuclear agreement and the potential regional ramifications. So sit back, relax, and have a listen.
Welcome to the program, Andrea Stricker.
Thank you, John. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Okay, let's get into this. I want to talk to you about Saudi Arabia and its nuclear prospects. And that's something that I think is scaring some folks. Some people are saying it's great. I think we're going to hear some debate about it. But maybe let's just start with the basics here of what a 1-2-3 agreement is and why Saudi Arabia wants one and why the Trump administration seems to want one.
It's based on the U.S. Atomic Energy Act of 1954, of all things. And it outlines the terms of nuclear cooperation with other countries, even like the IAEA. We have around 25 of those agreements already. And we'd be looking at some kind of transfer of U.S. technology, even nuclear material, to Saudi Arabia under this kind of a deal. And the Atomic Energy Act really gives Congress an opportunity to weigh in on these types of agreements and even pass a resolution of disapproval to stop them. Although we've never seen that happen in history of these agreements. There is a wide waiver provision actually for the president, the executive. And so depending on what's in this agreement, we could be seeing the spread of uranium enrichment and plutonium reprocessing. Those are the key processes that make fuel for nuclear weapons in the region, which I think would be a very bad thing. We could agree.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's cause for concern. I think there's additional cause for concern because this is happening alongside negotiations with Saudi Arabia's key rival in the Middle East. And of course, we're talking here about the Islamic Republic of Iran. And right now, part of these discussions about whether they should have the right to do this. So they're watching, they're seeing their Sunni rival. This is a Shiite regime. They're watching their Sunni rival potentially get the right to do this, a blessing from the United States. Does this lead to some friction, or can we make this balance happen?
Well, I think what we should be doing is trying to push back against Iranian enrichment and to roll back that program rather than spread the technology around the region. Because as you know well, it's not just going to be the Saudis that line up for it. It's going to be Turkey, which wants regional domination and has talked about having nuclear weapons. It's going to be Egypt, which has always been on the fence about maybe acquiring nuclear weapons and looked into it in the past. And it won't just stay limited to the Middle East. It'll go to Northeast Asia, where South Korea will try to seek enrichment and reprocessing. And we've successfully had that door closed to them with a lot of pushback. And once countries have the ability to make nuclear weapons fuel, then it's only a short step. Because that's the most time-consuming process of making nuclear weapons. It's only a short few years until everyone has nuclear weapons. And we saw just last week what happens with countries like India and Pakistan when they come to blows. And we're looking at them possibly facing off with nuclear weapons.
Right. And obviously we dodged a bullet there, or we dodged a bomb there. And I think that's good. And maybe there's mutual deterrence, mutually assured destruction. And that was obviously a key kind of a core principle that guided us during the Cold War here in the United States. We're facing off against the Soviets. And so maybe you could argue that there is a level of deterrence that is helpful. But in the Middle East, when we talk about, the word that the Israelis have used is a nuclear cascade. What does that mean exactly when we talk about this, and how dangerous is that?
Very dangerous. I think Vice President Vance actually articulated this very nicely at the Munich Security Conference. He talked about how if Iran goes nuclear, then it's just a matter of time before additional dominoes fall. And so it's my hope that the Vice President and the President see that spreading the means to make nuclear weapons fuel, we've even heard about some of these formulations like doing black box enrichment in Saudi Arabia, that the US would station an enrichment facility on a military base, perhaps try to limit or have no access to the Saudis being able to learn about this technology. Even having like a kill switch for centrifuges, or even having plans to blow up the facility if someone tried to take it over in some unforeseen scenario. Even that would, I think, send a message that this is a very military technology, even not an innocuous technology that other countries that seek those capabilities would want as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not innocuous. One of the things on a visit a few years ago to Saudi Arabia, I heard from senior people from the government that they believe that they're sitting on significant deposits of uranium. They think they're sitting on somewhere between, I think they said 2 to 6% of the world's uranium. They want to be able to mine it. They want to be able to mill it. They want to be able to potentially enrich it. Do you want to talk just for a minute about what that cycle looks like?
Sure. And, so far, at least there's a publication called the Red Book, put out, I believe, by the Nuclear Energy Agency. And they haven't found very economic deposits of uranium. That may change in Saudi Arabia. But look, there's no reason that we can't help the Saudis develop most aspects of the fuel cycle. So we can help them with the uranium mining. We can help with the milling and the conversion. But we should insist that they ship out the uranium at that point and have either the United States further enrich it for them and send it back in the form of nuclear fuel rods for reactors that we could also, by the way, build for them. In cooperation potentially with another country. Europeans also enrich uranium. We've got France and then the Urenco consortium that does it reliably and cheaply. So, we can offer all kinds of nuclear cooperation, but we just don't want them to take the step of enriching because then it will ruin this gold standard that the UAE has also, where they committed not to enrich and reprocess.
So let's talk about the UAE, right? I think that's kind of an important one, right? I mean, the UAE is sort of a peer competitor. It's the closest thing that we can say is a peer to the Saudis. They have an alliance. It's a competition of sorts, but they also have an alliance. They're largely aligned on most of the challenges across the region. So it seems to me that it's in the interest of the United States, if we're going to grant this to Saudi, that we granted it in the exact same way that we've granted it to the UAE. Is that where we're going here? Is that what you're picking up, the atmospherics?
So the UAE's 123 agreement, they committed not to enrich or reprocess, but if someone else is given different terms in the region, then they have the right to renegotiate their agreement. And then at that point, we could see multiple countries going for these capabilities, and that would not be a positive.
Yeah, and that's what we would essentially call the cascade, where then you watch all these other countries wanting to do the same thing, and it's a potentially nuclear arms race. It doesn't happen overnight, right? But it does happen if everybody starts to think, hey, I can enrich, I can jump in on this fuel cycle. Then all these different countries that you mentioned, UAE, Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, right? And by the way, there are a bunch of other countries that we mentioned that have the money and the means to be able to do this, right? Whether it's Kuwait or Qatar, these are all wealthy countries that potentially have the means to be able to do this. That's the major concern here. So now, what are the Israelis saying about all of this? I'm sure they're the ones that probably feel the most threatened. Have the Israelis taken an official position on any of this?
I think we are seeing a split where some in Israel were wanting some kind of a civil nuclear cooperation agreement if it meant that they would get normalization with Saudi Arabia. But then we've also seen people in the national security establishment who are really concerned that once you give up control of that technology, you really can't predict it, and that it would possibly lead to this domino cascade. And then we've also had something worth mentioning, which you also noted, is that Saudi Arabia threatened or said that they may go to China or Russia for this technology if they needed to. that would have fewer non-proliferation guardrails. So I think, we need to negotiate better than that and show that we have a lot more to bring to the table in terms of granting the Saudis potentially major non-NATO ally status, air defense against Iranian attacks. China and Russia are aligned with Iran more or less. So we need the Saudis to make a decision about what kind of future alliance they want. It looks like they're doing that with President Trump's visit. But if they're going to threaten to go to Russia or China for this technology, that should be a red flag.
Yeah, I absolutely. I don't really want to see the Russians or the Chinese starting to build reactors all around the region and granting that capability to a bunch of countries that may begin to stray from the American alliance. That seems like an unraveling that we don't want. Last thing I want to ask you before I let you go, Andrea, this question of whether all of this was potentially going to be tethered to a normalization agreement with Israel or some other structure that the U.S. would kind of bake in to an agreement. That seems to have kind of, I don't know, it's not part of the discussion anymore. Does that concern you? Can we handle this without building a broader alliance structure across the region?
Well, I think we will see normalization between the Saudis and Israelis eventually. It sounds like that's still under discussion. But I think President Trump has shown once again that he's always going to be independent-minded and that he's going to go for whatever agreement makes sense for the United States, also seeking the release of the American held hostage by Hamas yesterday. That's just the way he governs. I think for better or for worse, our allies have to adjust, but I don't think all hope is lost here.
All right, we'll leave it there. Like it, ending on a positive note. I want to thank you, Andrea Stricker, for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you.
Okay, here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD adjunct fellow Haitham Hassanein has a new piece in the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune making the case that Trump's Middle East legacy should include warming the cold peace between Egypt and Israel. He argues that both countries in the broader region stand to gain from deeper cooperation and sustained dialogue that could create a flourishing and lasting alliance. Check out my colleague Jack Burnham's latest FDD policy brief on the recent US-China joint statement announcing a 90-day tariff pause, with negotiations set to continue during the freeze. Jack sees this as a prime opening for the US to expand its leverage by scrubbing Chinese components from critical infrastructure and locking in trade deals that sideline China and strengthen the American economy. And don't miss my colleague Bradley Bowman's recent interview with the Cipher Brief on Trump's Golden Dome missile defense proposal, which is basically Israel's Iron Dome on steroids. It's informative, timely, and well worth the listen. And that's a wrap for today. Check out more expert analysis on our website and across our social media. And please do support our work with a tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest. Tune in Friday for another episode of the FDD Morning Brief. This one will be hosted by my colleague Hussein Abdul Hussein, who will be joined by Lebanese journalist and commentator Nadim Kotaik of Sky News Arabia. Nadim has written extensively on topics such as peace between Israel and the Arab world, the anti-Israel campus chaos, and how it plays directly into the hands of Islamist extremists and the regime in Iran. Should be a good one. Thanks for letting me host you today. I'm Natalie Ecanow, signing off for FDD.